A fresh wave of Russian attacks has hit Ukraine. The latest is the country's western city of Lviv, where 7 persons were killed. The strike came as Ukraine was still reeling from the deaths of at least 50 people at a military institute in the central city of Poltava on Tuesday. We have details in this report.
The incident occurred while the NUP leader was on his way to visit his lawyers on Tuesday in Bolindo, which is about 20 kilometers north of the capital, Kampala. A statement from the police said officers on site.
The attack on Lviv in the far west of Ukraine came as all of the country was under air raid alert. Witnesses said the city was targeted at about 2:40 GMT, and the mayor said later it had been hit by Kinzhal missiles as well as drones. Lviv mayor Andriy Sadovi said Russia had attacked with drones and hypersonic missiles early on Wednesday. Among those killed were a baby and 2 girls, as well as a woman working as a midwife in the city. Dozens of people were also wounded, and more than 40 buildings in the heart of the city damaged, including homes, schools and clinics. Lviv has largely been spared in the worst of the fighting over the 2.5 years of war. But last week, Russian strikes targeted its energy infrastructure, causing outages. Explosions were also heard over the capital, Kiev, as air defenses targeted Russian missiles. The Ukrainian military said the whole country has been placed under an air alert. Rescue workers are continuing to search through the rubble of a military institute in Poltava for survivors of Tuesday's attack. President Volodymyr Zelensky promised that what he called, quote, Russian scum, end quote, would pay for the attack, and calls for more air defenses so Ukraine could protect itself by carrying out its own long-range missile attacks. The president of Ukraine is due to meet with the Irish premier on Wednesday as Ireland prepares to announce new funding for Ukraine's war effort. The Taoiseach will also announce 43 million euros in aid to Ukraine. The Irish government said the package will provide essential humanitarian assistance, support rehabilitation and eventual reconstruction, and contributes to Ukraine's long-term goals.
In other news, the U.S. Justice Department has announced criminal charges Tuesday against Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and other senior militants in connection with the 7th of October 2023 rampage in Israel, marking the first effort by American law enforcement to formally call out the masterminds of the attack. The 7-count criminal complaint filed in federal court in New York City includes charges such as conspiracy to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization resulting in death, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals, and conspiracy to finance terrorism. It also accuses Iran and Lebanon's Hezbollah of providing financial support, weapons including rockets and military supplies to Hamas for use in attacks.
Today, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Yahya Sinwar and other senior leaders of Hamas for financing and directing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the security of the United States. As outlined in our complaint, those defendants, armed with weapons, political support, and funding from the government of Iran and support from Hezbollah, have led Hamas's efforts to destroy the state of Israel and murder civilians in support of that aim. These actions will not be our last. The Justice Department has a long memory. We will pursue the terrorists responsible for murdering Americans and those who illegally provide them with material support for the rest of their lives.
Make no mistake about it, Hamas leaders are going to pay for these crimes. And he and his team, for sure, will keep working around the clock to get this hostage deal done. He's met with the hostage families, all of them. We know that the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, is going to have a conversation with the American hostages this week. And so this is something that we are working again around the clock, 24/7. This is something his team is really steadfast.
Let's turn our attention to the United Kingdom, where its cave-in report has concluded that the Grenfell Tower fire that killed 72 people was the result of dishonest companies, successive governments, and a lack of strategy by the fire service. The report says a cladding product manufacturer deliberately concealed fire risk, while coalition and conservative governments ignored, delayed, or disregarded concerns. Chairman of the inquiry said all deaths were avoidable. A group representing the bereaved and survivors says the report shows they were failed by calculated dishonesty and greed. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has issued a state apology, saying the disaster should never have happened.
Part 5 of the report is concerned with the management of fire safety at the tower. Again, we find that the residents were badly let down. The picture is one of a persistent failure to give sufficient importance to the demands of fire safety, particularly the safety of vulnerable people, and a failure on the part of the Council to scrutinise that aspect of the organisation's activities adequately.
The judge concludes what we already knew, that every single loss of life that night was avoidable. Human life was never a priority, and we lost friends, neighbours and loved ones in the most horrific way through greed, corruption, incompetence and negligence. The recommendations published today are basic safety principles that should already exist, highlighting how the government's role, duties and obligations have been hollowed out by privatisation. Where voids were created as the government outsourced their duties, Kingspan, Celotex and Arconic filled the gaps with substandard and combustible materials. The judge concludes what we already knew, that every single loss of life that night was avoidable. Human life was never a priority, and we lost friends, neighbours and loved ones in the most horrific way through greed, corruption, incompetence and negligence. The recommendations